Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Diatribe. Those of you who aren't familiar with Diatribe is my pet project. It's something that I pulled together really to just talk about, whatever's on our mind, what's relevant in today's times, what aren't people talking about there? Maybe they're too afraid to talk about, or just going off on one. I do that all the time. That's why I call it diatribe. So the whole idea, again, is just to be able to really speak openly and honestly about issues that face us all, and hopefully allow people to pick something from these conversations that is really beneficial to them, or maybe help them think differently about something that they've held as, law, that sort of thing. And also to, again, just kind of put some positivity out in the world, and hopefully do good. So, of course, I have people from my tribe, honey, because we freaking rock. I've got Renee Ascrizzi. I'm giving her grief all day today because I've been like trying to like pretend my ass is Italian. I'm nowhere near it, and my Italian has gotten a lot worse since I've gone to Italy and come back, and I achieved my objective. So
You're
hold
still
on.
way ahead of me.
Okay, exactly. So, and that's perfectly okay.
Yep.
But you scored the hot Italian husband. So
I
like,
did. I did. And I became Italian that day. He
right.
informed
It's
me, and
kind
it's
of
official now.
fantastic, just so
Yeah.
we're clear. And I'm massively jealous, just so we're really, really clear on that. So, Renee, I will allow you to kind of give a little bit of background about who you are, why you're not even why you're here. Who knows why you're
I am
here,
here.
but tell us about you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me on. I fell in love with Diatribe the first time I saw it, and I was like, where do I sign up for this free service? Because I am in love. And then I immediately was like, oh my God, Phoenix is going to ask me anything he wants. And coming to you live from Boston, Renee loses it over trying to figure out a smart answer here. But my name's Renee Ascrizzi. I've been in EA for about 10 years now, with a couple additional years of experience in project management. But I love being an executive assistant. It's definitely my passion, and it took me a little bit of time to figure that out. But here I am living my best life, doing the job that I love. So I moved to Boston about 10 years ago now, and I wanted to work in education. I felt like Boston was the right place to go for that because there's a couple schools here,
Just a couple.
just a
You may have
couple.
heard of like all of them.
But when I got here, I needed a job. So I found one being an administrative assistant at an investment bank in the middle of the 2008 financial
Oh,
crisis.
fantastic.
So yeah, it was no big deal. I'm pretty sure I was the only one hired in banking that year.
Absolutely.
But it really gave me a taste for a working environment, and then what this kind of assistant role could be. Especially, I definitely didn't know anything about investment banking, so it was like, okay, figure all this out. No one's
Mhm.
going to teach you, and go excel.
Right.
With no help.
I love it.
So I quickly found my feet and came into my own with a role, but I was going to school again to pursue that dream in education, and eventually transitioned into a tech role, being an EA, and got to get my feet a little bit more wet, doing some more project-based work, and really understanding what support meant other than being just tied to a phone and being an answering machine and
Mhm.
shuffling papers. So now I found myself at this point where I've graduated from grad school, with a master's in education, and I've worked in finance and tech, which are super fast-paced industries, which kind of meant that when I tried out education, that wasn't for me. I was like, okay, well, we tried it. I would probably reinvest that money in a different way if I could do it again, but what are you going to do?
Right.
So I went back to this role, and that's really when I realized this is the job for me. That's where I excel, and that's where I can grow. And I've had great roles since, and supported more, senior level execs, and really began to embrace what that right hand means.
Mhm.
And now I'm excited because I think we can all feel this seismic shift happening, in our industry, and we know
Right.
that something's happening. And so I love these honest conversations because I feel like we can really hear, where each other are going. And I think we all have a little bit of FOMO, like, which way are we running? Like, I
Right.
want to go there.
Exactly. Well put. That's a great tweet right there. Which way are we running again?
Yeah, like,
Remind
I
me.
don't forget to tell me.
Right. Exactly. Well, you're in the
Uh,
know. Hello. I mean,
yeah, but it's really exciting because I think we are paving the way, and there's just no better time to have this job. At the same time, there's plenty of reasons to not want this job if you're not stepping up
preach.
your game.
Exactly, exactly. Well, actually, I want to dovetail off of that because I think
Yeah,
a lot of people are finding that, especially executive assistants, where we had that visibility in the office, we don't have the visibility anymore. So, I may have asked this in a previous diatribe, but I'm curious, how has your experience been, sort of being sequestered? I mean, have you actually taken on more? Do you feel like,
yeah.
are you worried that people aren't seeing your worth and your value? Like,
It
give me some
is.
insight.
It did really push that mirror like right here in front of your face to figure out like how are you driving value for your execs. I used to thrive on the let me walk you to your next meeting and get all my stuff done that way. But I thankfully felt like I was really comfortable with my execs that we had built a platform where I knew what kind of value I drove for them and I could continue that work from home. We were already using online collaboration tools like Asana. And
Wonderful.
so we just put that into overdrive. In the middle of the pandemic, my company recently acquired another company,
Oh my
so
God.
we were doing a few things, and I was, helping out with all these different components, but a lot of this just the train had to keep going. And even though I felt that it was harder to get my execs time, like certainly now I have to be a meeting on the calendar rather than just sitting across from you. And, that was certainly an adjustment, but generally speaking, the work changed, but the pace didn't.
Right.
And
Right.
that was great. Yeah.
Well put. Well put. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think a lot of people have, the struggle has been almost like a deprioritization of you. You know what I mean? And my question is, well, what are you gonna do about it? You gonna sit there and like lick your wounds, or are you gonna actually, kick the door even wider open and make sure that you matter, so to speak? And so for people that aren't familiar with me, and I God forbid this need to be
Who are you?
I know, right? Like really at this point, especially all the time I've been on LinkedIn, um, I tend to, I've also been an executive assistant for obviously 27 years. I'm no longer now. I'm like CEO of like way too many damn companies. But I tend to push EAs specifically because again, because of people like Renee. I love the ones who really, really like just dig in. They know their value. They've figured out their own self-awareness. They've got, they understand business and they've developed an understanding of business. And actually, let me jump on that a little bit.
Sure.
What do you think specifically you learned from your time in investment banking? Because for me, that was like boot camp 101. It was the best boot camp I've ever received, ever.
I learned one word: money.
Right.
Money drives the world around. And
Yes.
like I can't even describe this scene, Phoenix. Like I came in my little H&M suit that probably cost $40, and these guys have professional clothiers coming by. I mean, I was so out of my league. But I quickly learned that every detail is tied to a decision that is millions, if not billions of dollars. And all of this is going to a real thing, and work does matter and details matter. And that was a lesson enough. Like yeah.
That's
I know
great.
my salary was not more than their
Oh,
Christmas
stop,
bonus.
please.
Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter. I got my education out of that one.
Right, exactly. But that's also, I mean, and you mentioned it. I mean, as much as I love to beat the drum about, it's about the business. Maybe I should actually rewrite that and be like, it's about the money, because that's inevitably what it's about. Protecting that cash. Like, let's be honest with you.
Exactly. I think that, one thing that I've noticed EAs do over the past, I certainly was one of them at one time, is when you're sitting in that all hands or you're sitting in that company, annual meeting, listening to strategy, we're going to focus on the bottom line. We're going to focus on being obsessed with our customers. We're going to create a product better than anyone's ever seen on this market. Whatever your strategy is, and I'm sure it's somewhere in, you know, in a couple different directions.
Yep.
I feel like EA's felt exempt from that.
Right.
And
Well put.
that ain't the case. Like, that's just not how it works.
No.
And more now, I really feel that we need to draw a straight line between us and the money, us and the customer, us and the whatever the business goal is. But yeah, it's time.
I love that. I love that. And you've really hit the nail on the head. I mean, we can pretty much just end this conversation right now if you'd like to. Let's talk more though, because that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's another thing that used to drive me crazy. I was always the weirdo, if you will, in the audience, just taking copious notes. You know, I remember at Square, we used to have the best town halls, and it would just be like all the metrics, all the groups had to come and present. You know, I would sort of compare what they said last week with what they said this week. You know, look at the numbers. What did the numbers look like last week? I mean, of course they're mapped, but you know, there's also some nuance in that I knew because of the bosses that I had. I was always overlaying shit just to make sure. I'm like, okay, that doesn't jive. I'm gonna have to ask some questions. You know what I mean? But for me, that's really what I try to get across. For instance, to executive assistants in Tribe. Luckily, I don't have to work that hard because you guys are mostly badasses. But at the same time, again, it's that onus, that it's that new set of ears that you need to have in order to really get this information in, process it, but also vet it for accuracy along the way. And that's, you know, for instance, so let me ask you a question there. Like, for instance, when you're dealing with teams, for instance, if you're, you know, trying to give a real read on, you know, either a project or a team, you know, saying, you know, like with a deliverable date that is clearly slipping and all of that, like, what do you kind of listen for? Or do you, you know, actively listen even harder when you see these slips happening, or when you really want to give the real to your boss? You know,
that's a great question, because you do have to have that sixth sense and that eavesdropping a little bit. But I've always tried to position myself with my execs teams as, hey, I'm an asset to you. And I try to do that to draw information in, you know, because the more you know, the more you can position your boss for success. And so a lot of times I'm hopeful that those things actually come to my desk, that I don't have to listen to them. But sometimes it'll come across as like, hey, I just have a quick question. And you know, and that's not a quick question. That's not a quick question. No. I need feedback on this project because I actually don't know if we're going this way or that way. And
huge red flag.
2 days, you know what I mean? So, and I will kind of tease out, like, hey, what do you want to talk to him about? You know, I'll just find a good spot on the calendar where he's in the right headspace, you know, to deal with your question. But you gotta have to tease those things out. And I think, I think it's not even so much what you're listening for, even though those buzzwords are there, it's the anxiety around it, you know, and you know, a team that's building something and things are going great and they're head down and, you know, it's all wonderful, and a team that's like, you know, and you really have to be dialed into that. I like to think of it as those are my people, you know, those are my teams. And if they're feeling anxiety, well, that's only going to bubble up, you know, so I should feel that with them, you know, in order to empathize and be able to help.
And also be a really good conduit for them. I mean, I think a lot of times teams and sometimes managers, often managers, tiptoe a little too much. You know, they're too afraid to ask for fear of being labeled something they're not. They're too, you know, proud to ask even just the simplest, quote unquote, dumbest questions for fear of people pointing fingers or them thinking that your boss is just going to like rail on you. And it's not even the case at all.
Or showing some vulnerability. And I
hard for men.
Except that, you know, my company, thankfully, the one I'm at now, really embraces a culture of feedback where, you know, executives are available and they're there to help. But I think naturally, if you're a rising star, you want to show that good foot. You don't want to show when you have a grueling question that shows you have no idea what you're doing.
But isn't that kind of showing you're a good foot? You know what I mean? Like
I think it is.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think maybe that's a culture shift that needs to happen. And oddly enough, I think COVID is going to bring that about for them, because, we don't get that sort of nuance now. We don't get that sort of facial look or get a sense of being able to look at you and
Yeah.
judge, like, is this a good time to like do a pop by? No, 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 sweetie. It's not a good time. Run, in fact, you know what I
Run
mean?
away.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Another question I wanted to ask you is, when here's a question actually. How do you think COVID has sort of leveled the playing field? Because what I'm finding is that, not being in the office, a lot of the sort of dynamics have shifted, meaning a lot of that sort of hierarchy that used to be there is now replaced by name bubbles on the screen.
Yep.
Yes, the expectation is still there, but it's less of, you don't have to be perfect at every moment of the day. Whereas in the office, you do. I mean, there's so much more involved with, your persona at the office, most of which is bullshit, let's be honest. But, I'm just curious, are you noticing that sort of, leveling of the playing field, including from the C-suite?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because I was just speaking to people, earlier this week about this, that in re-envisioning kind of this workplace experience, what that looks like. We were talking about people that are typically remote and always feel like they're the oddball out. They're not in the room and they don't have as much influence. Well, now everybody's there. And I think if anything, if you've built so much, if you put a lot of effort and you've built this reputation for yourself of I'm accountable and you can rely on me and what have you, now is the time where you're really putting your money where your mouth is.
Yes,
And
indeed.
it's either solidifying it or it's showing up as bullshit.
Hmm.
And I think that in that way, no one can see anybody coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning or leaving at 6 o'clock at night. Like there's none of that counts. It's about the work that you deliver, and that's been really interesting.
Right.
Are you still available to your team? Are you delivering your work on time, even though no one's standing over your shoulder? And I've noticed it. I've noticed it pulling out the good in people and really showcasing the bad,
Hmm.
and very painfully. So while everyone's on this even level playing field, it's showing your good and bad big time.
I love that. And you know me, I already love it because my whole bent of all of this has been, and I've always beat the drum for remote work, remote work, remote work, like let's take it out. So I will spin off of that. Here's a question, since we're in racial times right now. So
Oh yes.
prepare to sweat. I'm just kidding. Um, um, I've always maintained that, working remotely could potentially solve a lot of the sort of behavioral, gender specific socialization problems that we have in large.
Oh, interesting.
I've always said, if you really want to like sort of like tamp this crap down, go
Yeah.
remote, because it's, in a weird way, it could it works kind of both ways. In other words, yes, you do lose some of your personality, like what makes you special. You know what I mean? You don't get to like kind of go up and down the office, in pink, purple plaid,
Right.
that tone. But what I do love about it is, since meritocracy is such a buzzword among the C-suite, then this is the true meritocracy, because it allows, for instance, hopefully allows for less discrimination to happen on the way into just getting a role. It also allows for those weird uncomfortable moments that lead to sexual harassment, that lead to racial harassment, or any sense of what do you call it, um, uh, uh, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. 50, almost 51, and I'm losing my mind. What do you call it? Something workplace, like the wow,
Oh yeah.
so embarrassing. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
But
Yeah.
just in an environment that's just not,
Yep.
just doesn't feel safe,
It
if you
doesn't
will.
feel safe.
So I'm kind of curious. I mean, do you think
Yeah.
I'm totally full of shit on this one, or is this something that maybe even if you're just thinking about it as, because I just threw the
Yeah.
question
No,
at you.
I totally am, because I had not considered that. It's so interesting because part of it feels similar to if you don't see someone's name or background or year they graduated on their resume when they're
Hmm.
applying, that if you really just take it down to what they've done. Part of it feels like that, where you're trying to strip away these opportunities for bias or inappropriate action. I'd like to think in the optimistic terms that we can get to a place where the office is this safe, innovative environment. But that's really interesting. One thing that I worry that would happen if we all went remote all the time, even though I do believe that it should be some kind of hybrid.
Yes, for sure.
That there's this opportunity for, I don't want to call it collaboration, because I think collaboration can happen in a lot of different ways, but it really is innovation. And like, hey, we're just talking about this, and we're just going to whiteboard it and make it happen. And those happen without a whiteboard and without everyone in the room, you know. But one thing, I don't know, I guess I like to think that can still happen in the office, but that's something that's really interesting.
Let me give you an out. I'm totally kidding. You don't need an out, okay? But you know, one of the things I am a believer in the hybrid. In other words, because I'm a Cancer, so I need human contact. I just do. It's like a basic human need for me, and a big time human need for me, actually. But you know, I feel that again, it should be mostly remote, but you know, special teams should come in, you know, once a week, twice a week, that sort of thing, where you do have some social connection, you do understand who it is that you're working with, but it isn't that everyday, you know, all day distraction type of environment that drives me effing crazy. You know, I would much rather be, you know, have that really focused time at work, because I've always enjoyed that. Like the 1-2 days a year that I would actually get to work from home, probably because I'm hacking up a lung, you know, I was the most productive.
It's so productive.
It's so productive. And I embrace.
No one's talking to you.
Exactly. Especially as an executive assistant, no interruptions like that. You can pick and choose your DM answer timing. You know what I mean? It's a whole different freedom that we have now, and a whole different power.
Hour of that time now, that is like the sexiest thing.
The best. Exactly.
Yeah, it is. That productivity thing is something that I think companies in general need to start treating workplace experience as a real function. You know, and as something to invest in and something to take seriously, because you know, you want to have the cool coffee bar, and you want to have all these cool things going on to get people attracted to your office. Well, that's all part of this experience. And if you are, you know, I am tied to tech. So to me, there's like these magic moments that happen in tech simply because we're there to talk through a problem. And I'm sure that translates to other industries just fine. But you know, if you want to cultivate this culture in your office, you need to invest in that and take it seriously and create these spaces where people can sit at a desk, sit in collaborative work, you know, lab kind of areas, sit in a quiet area, have a library somewhere. You know, all of these things are things that I think companies need to invest in. It's not just, you know, packets full of these open spaces to, you know, get more people into a smaller real estate.
Essentially, exactly. So here's another question for you. So with that, how about this? I'm just going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. Which either roles or industries maybe do you think will go away because of what we're experiencing now with COVID?
It's so interesting. I think that there's a lot that we're going to learn. Like I remember I was challenged to do this Operation Optimistic video on LinkedIn, and it was like the week before George Floyd was killed. So I was like ready with my optimistic video, and no one gave a shit with
I know, they were like, say what?
I read the room.
First timing ever. Exactly.
But what I was going to talk about is I really feel that that this is a moment in time when companies really have to think about the customer experience and the value that they're driving to the world. And are you meeting that? Like, there are things that I hope with all my heart that the travel industry right now is taking a good hard look at what that experience that we're all dying, or they're dying for us to come back to. we have to go to the airport, which is a miserable experience.
Always.
And we have to go through security. I'm not advocating for no security, but it's not fun.
It's not. And it's not effective anyway. So, okay.
Uncomfortable lounge, unless you pay a lot of money and get to a slightly less uncomfortable lounge, where you get on an uncomfortable plane. And like, just the day that JetBlue said you can have as many snacks as you want, like, that was a big deal. It cost nothing to make us happy.
That's hilarious.
You know what I mean? So I really think that we're going to stop doing some kind of dumb things and start doing some smart things. But I also think that there are other industries that are learning a lot because people are at home. I know a family member of mine is a young boy who has a food. He goes to a food therapist to help him learn how to eat. You know, he's young, but he doesn't eat. So he is going through that, and they've learned that every kid has done better when they've gone home because it's in their kitchen and mom and dad are preparing it, and it's their brand of peanut butter or whatever they're trying to eat, versus in this studio where, you know, it's a different kind of bread and it's a different kind of whatever else. It was this uncomfortable setting, and so now they're going to transition all of that. Similarly, my daughter recently had surgery. She's fine, but we had this pre-op appointment with the doctor, and it was for the parents. They didn't need to see her. They didn't, you know, it was just to walk us through what was going on.
Wonderful.
Instead of driving to the hospital, packing up the diaper bag, like going and paying for parking, and then, you know, coming back, we just did it over Zoom.
Fantastic.
And I just feel like this engagement, people have been pushing for a long time, and it's proven successful. This is it. We've proven that this remote model is just fine in plenty of circumstances, and I think we're going to save a lot of money and a lot of aggravation in the future.
And I agree, and I think a lot of companies are going to lean out. I mean, I think a lot of the processes that were actually sort of bogging down very simple A to B processes are, you know, will be cut, and those jobs that were causing that, you know, that sort of bottleneck all the time will be lost because they need to be. So with that, let's talk about executive assistants. As you know, I'm a big believer that, and I've been beating the drum about this for the last couple of years, that, you know, I was saying 2 years ago, hey, it's coming. I don't know what way it's coming, but it's a coming. 30% of y'all are about to lose your jobs. So you need to figure out, boss up your knowledge, get your education in, you know, use every last penny of what your companies are offering for continuing education budget, etc. Crickets mostly, except for the tribe, but like pretty much crickets. Like, oh please, I'm indispensable. They can't do without me. You know, I even went, and some of our, you know, EA advocate heroes were even saying that even then a couple of years ago, like, oh please, you know, our jobs will never go away. Well, I was right. So
when you think about that, and you think about the exact workplace experience that you just described, that was so terrible. Like, a lot of what we were relying on was that some old white dude would not know how to print an Excel sheet. And like, is that what you want?
Right.
Like,
and what does that, but is that something to aspire to?
No.
You know, like, okay, teach them how to do it. You know what I always say, teach them how to fish so they can eat every day, you know? So yeah, that's a whole other story. But, you know, I'm just kind of curious here's another question. I know you're gonna be like, oh Lord, why did I even agree to do this? If you could grade executive assistants, and luckily we have global exposure to them. If you could grade EAs right now, A to F, what would you give them? I know you're like, don't make me do it. You don't have to answer that if you don't want to. I'll answer it, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Always okay. There are exceptional EAs, and
there are. Oh yes.
So
okay.
Like the average grade is always going to be average, but right now we're probably more like a D than a C.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think that we just have. There's a couple things that I think we do and don't do. We need to treat ourselves more like other jobs in some areas and less in other areas. And what I mean by that is, like, we've always looked at ourselves as this protected group. My boss can't live without me.
Right.
They can't function without me.
Right.
And I need to be there.
Until COVID.
I don't think that's True.
Well, it's been proven not to be true now, isn't it?
Yeah. And so you need to treat yourself more like all the other jobs in your company where you need to pay attention to that town
Mhm.
hall. You need to understand your, your value that you
Yeah,
add
yeah.
and be really clear about that. But the part that we expect is like other jobs is that there's a clear path to how to do that people know and they're going to show us, and that day is never coming. Like
Never.
it's never coming.
It's deader than hell now. Like if there was sort of any glimmer of hope of that day ever happening before, it's dead and buried now. Like it's just not gonna happen. So,
Um,
one of the things, and I know a lot of EAs are like, oh my God, all you do is beat up on us. Why don't you give us something like to look forward to? I'm a big believer that this role is now shifting to a true business partnership type of role. Meaning, we need to get back in the books, get back on the YouTubes, get a different type of, training, instead of the same shit we've been seeing for the last 10 years, around, again, kind of like things that I'm teaching, like, strategy, like, how do you read, business reports or annual reports or whatever to sort of extrapolate information that is very specific to your department. How does your department actually fit within the general construct of the business that you
you
guys are
should be able to
running?
speak to that in
I
a
mean,
few
oh,
sentences.
it's insane to me how the simplest things are just like, and not just this, but also, oh no, I'm not trying
Yeah.
to do all that.
It's
You know what I
so
mean? And I'm just like, well, then what the hell?
I know. And when you go back to that grading, one thing I will go there for you. I
Good.
will give us a really low mark on excuses around technology.
Oh my God.
It's done. Microsoft has been on the market.
For about as long. In fact, I remember when all those programs actually started. So my ass is really
So
old, but
like
just so we're
you don't have
clear,
an excuse more. So I use
none,
I use G Suite right now at my company.
everybody.
And I actually feel like it's still my responsibility as a great EA to know what's going on in Outlook
Of
and
course.
Teams. And even though I don't even always have access to that, like
Right.
I still need to generally understand,
Right.
because that day comes tomorrow when they're like, hey, guess what? Or a board
We're,
member comes in who's using Outlook,
yep.
whatever it might be. That's my job. And just because, the rest of the company uses Jira, yeah, guess what? I need to know how to use it too.
And
And
it's
not be an
exhausting.
expert, but like you have to understand generally how these tools work if
Right.
that's what your team is using. And I don't, there are no more excuses.
I mean, and that's my thing. I mean, this really comes down to brand, which is something I teach. It's like, if that's what your role is, if you are support, in other words, in your skip from, obviously from investment banking to education and everything else, you're the type of assistant that I like, just because you adapt according to your environments. So if you're going into tech, then you're going to have to learn Jira. It's the language. I'm sorry to have to tell y'all that. It's
That's
how
what it
engineers think. And for me, I worked with a lot of engineers, and I had to figure out, okay, I need to be able to speak your language because y'all are a whole different breed. And I need to know what the hell is going on over there in them corners and cabals. So, I was able to sort of, get that. I was able, for instance, to be on these Hack Week projects with at Square, for instance, that ended up becoming things like, Square Cash and some of the other things that we've been doing. So again, I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to adapt, and you have to learn the tools that everybody in your department and everyone in your realm of responsibility use, or you're asked out. Like
you're
I
just
would
going to be
think you would
behind.
have to actually say that, but
Yeah.
and even when you say it, it's still what?
No, it is. And it's, I really love what you said about that personal brand, because one of the things I've been trying to ask myself, like, where is this going? Like, what's the next step for us? And a lot of what I believe comes back down to this, like, this notion that our companies hired our execs for a specific reason because they are a personal brand. They have an approach or a perspective on leadership, on how they're going to drive this department or this company or what have you, forward. They all came with an approach, and they might not necessarily even do it better or worse than the other candidates, but they had a specific part about them that was attractive to this company. And I think we have to start saying, like, hey, you're a new CEO in tech that needs to quickly ramp up a company and needs an HR department and an office manager, and I'm your girl. Or you need someone who is going to be your slide master and who is always going to know where information is for you. I'm the person for you. Exactly. We need to and the thing is, that's not going to be the same thing everywhere. Right. But are you willing to say, like, that's who I am and hire me or don't?
Right. And this role is a big hybridization experiment. I mean, let's be honest with you. I mean, I've always gone into it as, I want to be the number one resource at this company, the number one. Anyone from any level in this company can come to me, and inevitably that's what I tend to become when I work at any company. As when I was an executive assistant, everyone would be like, ask Phoenix. And I love that. They were just like, no, Charlie, you would ask Phoenix for that one because I have no clue. And I love that because, again, me being that resource and knowing everything about everything allows pretty much everyone to have someone that they can go to be a conduit, if you will. Like someone at a lower level, for instance, who was afraid to approach the CEO with a really good idea. I can sort of help them, package it in such a way where, boom, here you go. And you're about to get yourself a $25,000 bonus because you made the company millions and millions of dollars. Or even, CEO coming to me like, okay, where is that report that you, because I don't know who's the guy that wrote that report. I don't have a clue.
I love that.
You know what I mean?
Thing that I'm supposed to look at.
Right. What is it again? You know what I mean? I'm like, you actually wrote that, but here's the thing. You know what I mean? Let me get it for you. And it'll once you see it, it'll jog your brain. You'll be like, oh my God, thank you. You know what I mean? So again, there's so much that I really, more than anything, I want executive assistants to really understand the insane level of power that we have and influence and just this. We actually do have invincibility, but we still need to come to the table with something. We still need to show that we have some sort of tangible, value. That we provide some sort of tangible value, that we somehow affect the bottom line, that we somehow are that person that anyone can come to and sort of, take away the anxiety from both sides of the chain, and be that one person that just gets it, period. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is you have to, unfortunately, there's the inequity. We need to learn everything. Where some people get, you got one job, they get that luxury. We don't. We literally have to learn every single part, every single department, every single leader of every department, et cetera, and be that treasure trove of info. So.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. There's, you have to know it all. And one thing that I found to be true throughout my career is that some CEOs or some execs don't want you to focus on every single thing. Like, you could just be honest with them, and yes, you still need to know all the players. You generally have to have an idea, but you could ask and drill down, and where should I be spending my time?
Right.
And they might have a perspective on it that helps you really become an expert in one thing over the other.
100%. 100%. So here's a question for you. For those executive assistants, for instance, who are looking to, really level up and maybe move into, either, really level their position up in such a way where a lot of them, of course, we still kick around this whole chief of staff moniker, which I think is a joke. Not chiefs of staff, but I'm saying, for instance, this sort of, it's almost like a job du jour, You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
title that just sounds so cool, but I mean, people don't
Yeah.
really realize what a chief of staff actually does, and that the job actually kind of sucks. Like, I won't even lie. I'll just say it. I mean, because everybody hates you. Like, let's be honest. And I dare any chief of staff to come on here, look me up, diatribe, Phoenix Normand. I assure you, you are not universally loved, boo boo. You're not, because you are the Bucky Winklemeyer of all things business, just so we're clear. So, but I respect the hell out of you, because I know that's hard as hell.
It's hard.
It's hard, because people, it's like, oh, damn it, here comes that asshole again. You know what I mean? And so, I know, because I've had lots of Jesus. But, I think, again, it's, I'm just curious, as you work through your years of experience,
Mhm.
what advice, maybe let's look at it that way, what advice
Yeah.
could you impart on executive assistants who are just looking to continue to move forward, to step up,
Yeah.
to take on more stuff, and to be respected? That's really what we're looking for, is to be respected and feel like we actually have a voice.
Sure. There's a couple things I would say. One is some feedback that I got when I first started a role recently. Stop ordering pens. Stop doing it.
Love it.
Stop. You cannot be the person that finds the post-it notes for everyone. Get that shit on auto delivery. Like, if that's your job, that's fine. I'm not knocking it.
Right.
We all have to take the trash out.
Yeah,
in
we
some
do.
capacity.
Oh, yeah.
But get it on auto delivery. It's over there. Help yourself. You are not responsible for everyone in that company having a pen.
Right.
And so even though you want to be helpful and be an assistant, just really be careful about those ways that you are just doing bitch work. Like,
Yeah.
it could be automated.
Right.
Maybe it's important. Like, make sure they have pens at the board meeting. Don't get me wrong.
Well, of course. Yeah.
But you can't be that person that every time someone needs an office supply, they go to.
Right. And also look at that this way. And I don't want to cut off your second point. Just remember your second point, but I want to jump in on that really quickly, because I think a lot of things that executive assistants aren't doing is thinking strategically that way. Like, that's expensive. Your time is expensive. So, if you were to sort of look at how much time you spend online looking to order a damn pen, you really have to sort of think about, if I'm spending all of this time doing this, this, and this, if I'm straightening conference room chairs, if I'm going to Starbucks for 6 people, if I'm, getting lunch and having to go pick it up as opposed to having it brought to the office, what does that actually costing? One, it's actually costing you money. Two, it's actually costing you sort of what I call social capital, because people will always look at you as the coffee getter, the chair straightener, the coffee, the procurement specialist, that sort of thing. And I think if you write a book, and I hope you do, that should be the title of your book: Stop Ordering Pens. I think that would be a brilliant freaking title, because it's probably set you up in such a good way with regard to, how you move forward, you move forward from that.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that. Thank you. But I really believe that you have to, it's a hard thing to really internalize, but you actually have to stop being the helper to everyone in order to dive into this role and do it well. The other thing that I would say is, you have to have some kind of value statement. I talk about this a lot, about value statements. You have to have a statement that describes the value you add to your exec, and you need to hold yourself accountable to that, like your life depends on it, because your job actually does depend on it. One example I have of that is, the value statement I have with my exec is, I am responsible for managing your time, not your calendar, but your time. And when I think about that as it would relate to a project, like project management, I am responsible for the success or failure of your time spent.
Wow. Like that was an atom bomb. Like, can we just ruminate on that for just a minute? Like, that is so freaking brilliant. Like, I'm so stealing that from my classes again. I am here to manage your time, not your calendar. That literally is epiphany a la go-go. Like, seriously, are we done? Hold on. Because it's exactly right.
A while ago.
Brilliant.
I was going to start analyzing my boss's time spent. And I wasn't going to judge it. Like I have two guys that I support. One needs a break every 2.5 hours before he pokes his eyes out. And the other is like, hey, I'd like you to book me from 7 to 6 and no breaks. And it's not for me to judge how you want to spend your time, but this is how you're spending your time. Does this reflect what you want?
Right.
And then we would really get into some deep conversations around like, hey, you're doing all these office visits. What are you doing when you get there? Like, are those conversations good? Are they worthwhile?
Right.
Like, how could they be better? And we
Right.
really went deep into, and now we approach travel differently. Now we approach, a lot of things differently, but it's holding yourself accountable to, I want my boss's time to be spent exactly the way he wants it to be spent. So if, we're doing a lot of things differently now. We're taking care of travel differently now. We're taking care of team meetings differently now. But I really hold myself accountable to, if I am responsible for having you spend your time the way you want to, what are all of the actions that I can take to make sure that's done? Is it really working with leaders to understand what's the meat of the conversation you want to have with this person, and how can they prep for it, and how can they, what other issues is that very thing that you just handed me uncovering that we need to deal with, whatever it might be. And obviously this is all situational to your organization, but like your job depends on it, what are all the things that you can do to hold yourself accountable to that value statement? And it's really, COVID, as you said, has changed the game. Is your value statement different? Because I bet you're not booking a lot of plane tickets right now. So
No.
What is it? And it's totally okay if that changes over time, just naturally, organically, because your relationship changes or the business changes. But,
Right.
I always believe that an exec and their assistant should both be able to say a sentence or two about how each, one supports the other. And those two sentences should be more or less the same,
Right.
and I don't think they often are.
They aren't.
So what I would say to assistants is really get into that value statement and say like, hey, like this is the value I could add, or this is the value I want to add. And, sometimes you got to do it and beg for forgiveness later, but
Again, I think you're absolutely right. I think again, COVID has really created this dynamic where those value statements have to change. You need to understand that the value that you provided pre-COVID is probably 30 to 40% less if your job was more entailed around very task-based work as opposed to project-based work, which is a question I have for you. So, do you find you're able to sort of work with your executive to really kind of insert yourself in more project-driven work as opposed to more task-based stuff? But because of COVID, you're kind of straddling the line. I mean, I know there's a lot of task-based stuff that needs to be done, but it feels like a lot of tasks are just non-existent now. So I think that's really the chasm that a lot of executive assistants are falling into, is the fact that portion of their job basically went away. If they weren't already working on projects, then now they're scrambling to try to find some projects to work on, but they've unfortunately trained their executives to only be task-based executives. So I'm just kind of curious how you've been sort of circumnavigating that hot mess.
Yeah, I do think that, I've been pretty honest with my execs that my bandwidth has changed.
Mhm.
And, I'm not greeting customers at the door. I'm not helping setting up for board meetings, and I'm not booking travel or doing any subsequent expenses. So, that time is available. And we've, dove in a couple of different projects here and there throughout COVID. And I don't expect that will change. I will say that I think EA should treat their exec's calendar as a project. I think that, we have continued with travel. Our business need to travel is still there. And so we've been doing virtual trips. And I actually think that virtual trips might be something that we do in the future, because a lot of that value is happening remotely. But I don't want to create this impression that you can either do tasks or do project-based work, and those two things are going to be the line in the sand where one's valuable and one's not.
Right.
I really think that a lot of what I hear at EA meetups, around town is that like, oh, I just don't want to schedule meetings. I'm like, that is the meat, and that is the thing.
Right.
You are, I mean, if you think about an exec's impact to an organization, it's how they spend their time in that organization, and you are helping to drive that. And so I would encourage EAs to treat that like a project. But in that part, it's interesting because since COVID, we've been actually able to do that a little bit more and dive in a little further in that department. But yeah, I would say that the short answer is my time spent has changed, and I have more bandwidth. And when you can show your exec that you can treat that calendar like a project, I think they're more inclined to engage you on one-off things here and there as they need you to weave in and out of different business objectives with projects.
I love that. Great answer. So we've got time for one more question. So of course I have to hit you with a zinger. What do you think the disconnect, generally speaking, is between executive assistants and their executives? Because we've still not solved this big fat pink elephant in the room where there's always this, I don't know how I'd put this. I won't say even an expectation. It's like maybe it's a lack of expectation that in some way the executive assistant just is kind of in it, but not in it to win it. Like all the executives and all the other, business functions or whatever, like they show their worth, they show their, their teeth and whatever else. But executive assistants kind of float. They do, the good stuff. They keep me on track and I can't live without them and all that BS. But it's not the same type of energy and like tutelage and chuck under the chin and all of the other stuff that is readily shown to other business entities. So I'm just kind of curious, like what do you think is the disconnect?
That's a good question.
As an ending question, that's kind of effed up, just so we're clear.
I would have to say that it's honest, like brutally honest feedback. I think that execs sometimes get scared that they're getting what they think is 80% awesome, and they don't want to give up 80% to fix the 20. But I think without that feedback, they're actually only getting like 40. Because I mean, an EA might be working really hard to do everything that they think is wonderful, but what if you're driving your exec nuts?
Right.
What if there's an opportunity and you just don't even know about it? But I just don't think we really talk to each other the same way that other leaders that usually report into our execs talk to them. I don't think, if you try to think about your average CEO's direct reports, like who are those people? And then you've got all these different leaders and then the EA. And it's, there is a difference. I think there's never going to be a day where those are all equal. Those people probably have more experience than you. They probably, have led more people. Like it's just different, and that's okay. But the value you add can still be, on par with one another. It's more just, I think EAs need to be willing to have those difficult conversations, and I actually think it's on us to draw it out of our execs.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so I can't just end on that because now I gotta dive in a little harder. Just one more, I promise. So here's a question then: do you honestly think that equality is actually possible?
I do think. Again, I'm an optimist. I think if we don't believe it's possible, we'll never get there.
Right.
But I do think that that one thing that needs to come alongside equality, because I think that a lot of times people turn that into a number or a ratio, or I check the box, or I've got a female on my staff and it's my assistant, or and it's not genuine. And these reasons behind equality, or like why you set your team up this way, aren't really accomplishing the goals that you set out to do. But I think if we really internalize the concept of diversity, um, we might be more open to what that was intended to be. So, like in tech, I know that you can go get your degree in computer science and learn how to be a coder. You could also have a degree in chemistry and come work as a scientist, in tech, and do something completely different. But that background is valuable because it's different.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with women or race or anything else, but really trying to find value in a different perspective. And I think until we do that, all of these questions around equality, they're not really going to get very far, because we're not doing it for the right reason, which is to value the difference in each other's background.
Well put. Well put.
And so I really am hopeful that I think all of the issues going around the workplace in the world right now are hard for a lot of people to internalize and really understand. And I'm certainly one of them. But I think that we all can recognize this concept of diversity and that being a benefit. And if you really internalize that, I think, that might be harder for leaders who have more experience working in, the same and the same and the same. But that's the ticket.
Right.
I'm unique to your staff because I don't have all this background of, I don't have 20 years of experience of the same thing. I can see it differently, and you should value that,
Right.
And it's the same underlying broad stroke concept of why we should embrace people of different backgrounds all over the place, so I'm hopeful that I am hopeful that our current world events can help drive that idea and have us really embrace this idea of diversity as a not just as something we have to do, but as a true game-changing benefit.
Right.
So,
well,
you gotta believe, Phoenix. It's it's never gonna happen if you don't believe it. It might happen.
I appreciate that, actually, because I tend to be a little skeptical. I mean,
I know, and even
a black, gay, almost 51-year-old man. I'm just like, here we go again.
I can look out my window and say, oh yeah, that's so good. But
exactly.
You have to believe, otherwise we've given up.
And that's true. I mean, that's what this, in a weird way, that's kind of our human nature, is to believe in the good. I always tell people, if you ever wonder, or if you ever feel the world just completely sucks, remember that every single day up to this moment, you've crossed the street without incident, unless you've been hit, of course.
Correct.
Which means that there is nothing but love and trust actually in the world, where people will actually stop and allow you to cross the street safely without running your ass over. So there you go. There's your love, and there's your, that should hopefully give you a happy moment. Go get some ice cream and shut up. So anyway, thank you, Renee. This has been fantastic. I apologize for all the blips and everything else, but
no, please. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been great, and I just adore you. You know that, and I'm super proud of you. First of all, I love the trajectory that you're setting for yourself, and you're one of my very favorite executive assistants. You tell it like it is. You tell it like it is, and you DGAF. But you do, but you DGAF at the same time, which I appreciate. So thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining Diatribe. I love doing this. I get to talk to some of my very favorite people. We're also going to be having some extra special guests coming in very shortly to give us information, things in the wild, these shifts that are happening because of COVID. For instance, I just reached out to a friend who will do one for Agile, because we're all Agile-based companies these days, and I'm a big believer that executive assistants now need to become Scrum Masters. So we'll talk about that another time. We'll let him sort of dive in and give us some sort of insight. But thank you again. If you ever have any questions or anything like that, please feel free, DM me in the comment section. If you hate everything I said, feel free, you know where to find me. Pack a lunch stuff, you come for me. And we'll be back again next week with another one. So Renee, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.